Hey everybody, it's Rob from Rob's Game Group. Welcome back to another one of my look at the book videos. Now, the video that I'm going to be doing today, the book that we're going to be taking a look at, just came out this week, and it is the book for Stargrave. Science fiction war games in the ravaged galaxy. Now, if you follow my channel for any amount of time, you know that I'm a big fan of Frostgrave. And I've done some videos on it. It is a small fast skirmish game where you have a wizard and apprentice, and they have a group of up to 8 hirelings, basically. And they go into the cities and fight each other, this ruined city, and they're looking for treasure and whatnot. It's very Mordheim-esque, and since it came out, people have been asking for Stargrave in space, or Frostgrave in space. And so let's just get that out of the way right now, because that's exactly what this is. It is Frostgrave in space. Are there some differences? Yeah, there's some slight differences that I gotta say I kind of like a lot. But at the core, at the end of the day, it is, if you've played Frostgrave, you'll already be very familiar with this when you pick it up, and it won't take but a few minutes to get into it. So like with all my look at the books, I'm not going to go through and read you the book, obviously, but I am going to read you some stuff, and I'm going to point out some of the differences in this and from this to Frostgrave. Like Frostgrave, they make their own miniatures for this. They're by North Star Military Miniatures, I think. And but it's a miniature agnostic game, so you can use whatever miniatures you want. I have a lot of sci-fi minis from Zombicide Invader. I got a big bucket full of Star Wars miniatures from Wizard of the Coast over here, and I feel like I'm gonna my biggest thing I think is gonna be having to put together sci-fi terrain, because I don't have a lot of sci-fi terrain, so I'm gonna have to build some. But you can use pretty much whatever miniatures you want. And yes, Josh, you can use space teddy bears. For the love of God. Anyway. Alright, so from the back of the book, Stargrave, science fiction war games in the ravaged galaxy. In a galaxy torn apart by the last war, vast pirate fleets roam from system to system, robbing, extorting, and rounding up slaves. Any attempt to form any kind of central authority larger than a city-state is quickly and brutally crushed. In this dark time, the only way to survive is to stay small and inconspicuous. Amidst the chaos, however, thousands of independent crews manage to carry on their business. Smugglers, relic hunters, freedom fighters, and mercenaries roam the dead stars in small ships, scratching out a living any way they can. In Stargrave, from Joseph A. McCullough, creator of Frostgrave, players control these independent operators, recruiting captains and first mates from a range of backgrounds, each with their own skill sets and abilities. Their crews are made up of the toughest the galactic underworld has to offer: criminals, soldiers, hackers, and adventurers from 1,000 different worlds. In both one-off games and ongoing campaigns, the crews will be tasked with a variety of missions, from recovery of lost technology to data heist, and perhaps even striking back against the pirate fleets. Will their victories bring them wealth and infamy, or are they destined to fall prey to the horrors that lie in the ravaged galaxy? So I think the retail on this is like 35. Yeah, 35 US. 35 bucks US. It is put out by Osprey Games, and they put out some fantastic games. Like I said, obviously I'm a fan of Frostgrave, but they also, what else did they put out here recently? Oh, Those Dark Places, which is a role-playing game, but it's really good as well. So there is a great layout in this book, like you come to expect from all of Osprey's stuff. You have an incoming transmission right after the table of contents, which is pretty much the little blurb that I just read you off the back. What you need to play: you need miniatures. It talks about miniatures, and it talks about the miniatures being agnostic and you being able to choose whatever minis you want. You need dice. You need D20s, at least a D20 to play. Unlike a lot of miniature games, they use a D20 in this instead of D6s. And it talks about the table. You're going to need a table to play on, and the different table sizes, stepping it up from a 2x2 to a 3x3 to a 4x4, and the kind of terrain. Obviously, that's something they had to address in this, because not everybody has tons of different terrain to represent different worlds and environments, because you can be playing in so many different places. Games can be run in starports, asteroid mining complexes, steaming jungles, crowded cities, desert canyons, or any other cool setting you can think of. So it talks about how to just use whatever terrain you can, or how to makeshift terrain if you need to. And it talks about the cruise ship and templates that are in the back for filling out your information on your crew. It is a full color art book, and the art is really good. Excuse me. Chapter 1, we talk about assembling a crew. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to, when you're creating your captain, you're going to pick a background for them. And these backgrounds are going to determine their starting modifications and their core powers that they get. And you can have, it's kind of like the schools of magic that you choose in Frostgrave when you create a wizard. But in here you have a biomorph, a cyborg, a mystic, a robotics expert, a rogue, a psionicist, a techer, or a veteran. And each one has an information about it, their starting modifications, and their core powers. Then it talks about how to choose your powers, the base stat line for a captain, which is right here, another full art page there. And that's your base stat line, but then it gets modified depending on the type of captain background that you chose. Then you go to create your first mate. Now, this is a big difference between this and Frostgrave. Whereas Frostgrave, basically you have your wizard, and then you have your apprentice, and your apprentice is basically 2 steps behind your wizard. And other than that, they're an exact duplicate of the wizard. In this, though, your captain and your first mate can have completely different backgrounds, so they can give them different stats and different skill sets. The difference in here is going to be the level, because a starting captain in this is level 15, and a starting first mate is a level 0 character. And then you level them up however you want to. There's a way to go through it in here. But you have your first mate stat and everything just like you do for the captain, which again gets changed depending on the background modifications you take. Then you go to recruiting soldiers. You can have 8 soldiers. That's another thing about this. It's a great skirmish game because you never need more than 10 models to play. Your warband is not going to be more than 10 models. Your captain, your first mate, and then your crew of up to 8 guys. And they will either be standard soldiers or specialist. Only 4 of those 8, so only half of them can be specialist. And then they have a chart for each of them in here, and it has their stats and gear and all that on it. So standard soldiers, you have a recruit, a runner, a hacker, a chiseler, guard dog, sentry, trooper, and a medic. And then specialist soldiers, you have a code breaker, a case cracker, a commando, pathfinder, a sniper, a grenadier, a burner, a gunner, or an armored trooper. And it talks about their soldier gear. And then you have the robots rule. And basically you can make anything in your crew other than your captain and your first mate cannot be robots. But anybody else in your crew could be robots. And they could look like robots, droids from Star Wars. Or they could be like, Terminators where they look human. It doesn't really have an effect other than the way certain powers will affect them or not affect them if they're robots. But it doesn't change the cost. on them. It talks about temporary crew members and how you use those. And then aliens is kept very, there's a whole section on aliens and Stargrave and how it's kept very generic and broken into two groups, either humanoids or non-humanoids. And per the core rules, you can't put non-humanoids in your warband, but if you really, really wanted to, you can, and it talks about that in here too. You just have to make sure your opponent understands what they represent. Let's see, then we get to our equipment list with another full art page, which is really cool. The equipment listed in here, you have a deck, filter mask, medic kit, picks. Then we go into weapons, and it's your standard unarmed, knife, hand weapon, pistol, carbine, shotgun, rapid fire, grenade, fragmentation, or smoke. Grenade launcher, flamethrower. Your armor is light armor, heavy armor, combat armor, and shields. And then you have a chart for your armor and another full page art. That's just cool looking. I don't know, I feel like that's a dwarf in that spacesuit. Or maybe it's just a fat dude. And then we go into chapter 2, the rules. It tells you about how to set up the table, how to place loot tokens, and then it breaks the turn down, the initiative phase. Then which this is all very familiar to Frostgrave. You have the initiative just like you do there. And then instead of a wizard phase, you have a captain phase. Instead of a, an apprentice phase, you have a first mate phase. Then you have a soldier phase, and then you have a creature phase if you have creatures on the table. There's rules in here on the activation, tells you how it works, tells you how movement works. Figure facing doesn't matter. How obstructions and rough ground work, movement in combat, how to force combat if you get close to somebody, how to start a combat, moving off the table, jumping, falling, swimming, all of that's covered. Then we go into combat, works just like it does in Frostgrave, which means that combat is exceedingly deadly in this game, because it's exceedingly deadly in Frostgrave. Bad roll and you can be dead quick. Then there's a section describing how multiple combats work with multiple combatants in one combat. And then shooting, how you can't exceed the range of your weapon. You have to check line of sight just like you do in Frostgrave. A lot of this is very similar to, like, very, very much, you've played Frostgrave, you know how to do this. It's got the modifier tables for shooting, which I thought was neat. You have the intervening terrain, which is normal. Hasty shot if the shooter moved during their previous activation. If they had to clear a jam, there's a modifier. And then there's cover, stunned, heavy cover, large targets, shooting into combat, shooting with a flamethrower, throwing and firing grenades. And then we have our rules on extreme results for critical hits, weapon jams, damage. You have stun, wounded, toxin damage. And then we go into the powers that captains can and first mates can have, and how to do a power move, cancel powers, targeting figures in combat with powers, and just more cool art. Really sets the tone. Let's see, collecting loot tokens. Yes. How to collect loot tokens, and then we go into the final part of the phase, which is creature actions. And just like in Frostgrave, the creatures, you go creature by creature, and it goes through a checklist. Is the creature in combat? No. Then proceed to step 2. Yes. Then it will use its action to fight. If it wins the combat, it will choose to stay in combat, so on and so forth. Step 2, is there a crew member in line of sight? Yes or no? And step 3, target point or random movement. And then it talks about ending the game, and we start chapter 3, which is on campaigns. Alright, so at the end of a game, much like Frostgrave, your regular soldiers that you can have up to 8 of, whether they're specialists or not, Any of them that got taken out, you have to check with a D20 roll to find out if they are dead, badly wounded, or fully recovered. If they're dead, you have to replace them, obviously. You have just like in Frostgrave, you have a different chart for captains and first mates, which goes everywhere from dead to permanent injury to badly wounded to close call to full recovery. And there's a full explanation upon what each of those means. But permanent injuries, you could lose toes, smashed leg, crushed arm, lost fingers, never quite as strong again, psychological scars, lingering injury, smashed jaw, lost eye. And it tells you what each of those does if you have that effect on your captain or your first mate. Now here's where things get a little another place they get different. They get different back when we talked about the first mate, how he can have a different background and therefore different powers and stuff than the captain, which is not like Frostgrave, because in Frostgrave the apprentice is pretty much a carbon clone of that wizard. In here you have a chart for experience, just like you do in Frostgrave, and you gain experience for various things. You get 30 points for each game played with the crew. You get 30 points if the crew had at least one figure reduced to 0 health during the game. You get 20 points for each loot token unlocked by a member of the crew. For each power successfully activated by the captain or the first mate, you get plus 10 points up to a maximum of 100. Excuse me. Plus 10 points for each member of a rival crew reduced to 0 by a member of your crew, up to a maximum of 40 points. And plus 5 points for each uncontrolled creature reduced to 0 by a member of your crew. And here's where it gets different, because you have that chart, but then over here on this page you have a new chart for leveling up. Just like in Frostgrave, you can get a max of like 300 XP per game, and you can, for every 100 XP you spend, you can gain a level. Well, remember, your captain starts at 15 and your apprentice starts at 0, and you can choose to do those any way you want to. You give 3 levels to your captain, you give 2 levels to the captain, 1 level to the apprentice, you give all 3 levels to the apprentice. And each time they gain a new level, different things happen, because you have a chart you have to follow now. Whereas in Frostgrave, every time you gain a level, you could just pick one of 3 things to do. Well, you can't really do that in here, because they've made it where they force you to branch out, and you can't just focus on one thing, one stat, and max it out. Also, your limitation is your captain can never be more than 20 levels higher than the first mate, and the first mate must always be at least 5 levels below the captain. So you go on this chart right here, and first level, you come across whichever one you give it to, you can lower an activation number. So, an activation of a roll that you have to make to cast a power or use a power. But when you do when you give that character the second level, you can't choose that again. You have to come over here, and it is improve a stat. Then when you do a third level, and it goes up all the way down like that, and all the way down to 10, then back up to 11. So you have to go through this list repeatedly in order to level your characters up. And each time they gain a level, something different happens. You don't just get to, like I said, focus on just the stats. Those are really the 2 big changes that are different from that and the apprentice, the way he works. The big changes from Frostgrave. Then you have your charts for counting loot, whether it's data loot or physical loot, and it's a 1d20 roll on the chart to find out what you get. Just like in a campaign for Frostgrave, same type thing. Whether it's credit, information, secrets, trade good, advanced weapons. And if it's advanced weapons or advanced technology, you have a chart for those that you roll on to find out what you get. And this is all for campaign play, obviously. You wouldn't do this for a one-off. But I'm not going to read all of those. There's a whole bunch of different ones. Alien artifacts. Alright, then you get to a section on spending loot. And spending loot, you can use it on new soldiers, new captains, new first mate. You can sell items, buy items. And you start out in this one with a ship, which you can pay a lot of money to improve. The ship functions basically the same way that it did, or the headquarters, home base functions in Frostgrave. In Frostgrave, you have to play at least one game going into the city, and then you can claim one of multiple different types of buildings, whether it's an old library, an inn, or whatever, and set your home base up there, and it gives your crew, your warband, some type of benefit. We have the same thing here. You basically have a ship that doesn't have any stats or anything because it's not relevant to the game, but it's how you got to the planet where you're at, and each of these upgrades you do to it gives you some type of benefit, just like that home base. So that's pretty neat, but you do start out with that. They have an optional rule for balancing scenarios that I'm probably going to port over to Frostgrave. So when you have players who, like if I'm playing a lot of games and my guys are getting ahead in levels, and then I'm playing against, I don't know, Haley, and she hasn't got any games in yet, if there's a big level difference between us, there's a chart in here that the bigger the level difference, the more rerolls she would get when playing against me. So that's kind of cool. I like that a lot. Chapter 4 is our power section, and it breaks down the powers, the name, activation, strain, category, line of sight, how all that works. And then it gives you a list of all the powers in alphabetical order. And again, I'm not going to read them. There's a whole bunch of them here. It's just like, you got a lot of them, probably 80, just like the spells for Frostgrave. And we get to our scenarios. Now, this is different from Frostgrave 2, because Frostgrave is in its second edition. I think the scenarios in that book there's 20, and this, much like the original Frostgrave book, only has 10. But they look good, and there's already a scenario book or a campaign book that's slated to be out by September. I can't remember what it's called now, but I saw it on Amazon this morning. Let's see, the scenarios. Each scenario, just like in Frostgrave, gives you background on the scenario, setup for the table, special rules, and then any special loot or experience for each scenario. So we have a scenario called the Botch Deal. We have one called Salvage Crew. Steam Vents of the Undercity, very Necromunda. Data Vault. Sky Mine. The Broken Fence. Let's see. The Starport Raid. The Derelict Warship. The Overgrown Factory. And Fire Moon. And then you get to Chapter 6, which is your Bestiary, however you want to say it. And it has random encounter charts, unwanted attention charts, how to do your random monsters. Then it has the creature list itself, which is not huge, but a lot of these can be used for multiple different types of miniatures. You have a bile worm. Okay, well, if you have a big nasty worm that could be an alien, there's a chart here to use for it, and they've got their stats for their monsters, just like your guys have stats. But you have bile worms, you have bounty hunters, you have Deadfords, drones, ferox, gaunch, horats, magmites, mine rippers, pirate shock troopers, pirate troopers, primitives, porigota, a repair bot, a ruffian, a rayakin. And a lot of these are just made up names to represent different types of alien creatures you can run across. Centrabot, a sewer dragon, a tangler, warbot, warpound. Again, just more fantastic art in here. And then you have a creature's ability list, which tells you when a creature has an ability, what that ability does. Alright, let's get on past this. Then we hit the credits, and you have the sheet in the back for your crew. Alright. And Can't get my fat fingers on the pages now. They go ahead and give you the cards for the powers in here that you can download or print or scan and print out and make your own cards. I did that with Frostgrave, and it's proven very useful. And then you have a quick reference section. I also print these out and use them with Frostgrave because having quick reference on the table, not having to look through the book, is very handy. And that's all that comes in it. That is it. It is a nice, thick, hardbound book. Let's see, about 176 pages. If you are looking for a small skirmish game to get into that you don't have to spend a lot of money, and you can use whatever miniatures you want. If you want to go sci-fi, then go Stargrave. If you want fantasy, go Frostgrave. Both of these games are fantastic. They're a lot of fun. They have huge followings. They have a lot of support online. There are Facebook groups for them. Like I said, I play both. Just got this in, haven't actually played it yet, but I just got it in, and me and several of my friends are already, we've been plotting what kind of cruise we were going to build for the last couple of months since we found out about this. But we've got a fairly good sized group that's going to get together and play Stargrave. And we have a good sized group that's getting together to play Frostgrave too. So very happy because I like skirmish games as opposed to big army games. But yeah, if you're looking for some small skirmish game set in a sci-fi universe that's not super detailed, so it's vague enough you could do whatever you wanted to with it, then I highly recommend picking up Stargrave. You can get it off Amazon for $31 right now as opposed to the $36 I paid for it by pre-ordering it. That would be my one complaint, is I don't know why I pre-ordered it, because it didn't give me any benefit. I didn't get anything early. I got it same time as everybody else. I didn't get a PDF with it or anything, and it just I don't know. The day it came out, it was cheaper than it was when I pre-ordered it, so I'm not sure about the whole pre-ordering thing. I probably won't pre-order the expansion for it coming out in September. I'll just wait till it comes out and get it cheaper, I guess. But yeah, super excited. Been waiting on this for quite some time. Can't wait to see what kind of miniatures other people come up with. I know DM James is excited about this. He's been printing a bunch of miniatures for it. Dude, I want to see what all you do with it. Maybe look into some of the 3D terrain you could print. That might be pretty cool too. I'd like to see some of that. But yeah, that is it. That is our look at Stargrave. So if this looks like something you want to pick up, then you can tell them you saw it here first, and it won't mean anything. But until next time, good gaming and good luck.